Michael Klam, host of Conversations with Poets here at the San Diego Public Library downtown. Gotta give a shout out to Misty Jones and to Mark Cherry for all of their support and the support of poetry and literacy in San Diego. Also want to say thank you to Anthony Blackshear, behind the scenes directing and also representing the San Diego Poetry Annual and the San Diego Entertainment and Arts Guild. Thanks to Sherwood Hartwell and Kent Tran on cameras and sound and editing. I'm here today with Sharon Elise, professor of critical race studies, black feminism, intersectionality, women of color, and sociopoetics. Sharon, we've known each other for a long time. Will you tell us a little bit about sociopoetics?
Oh, I'd be glad to. Sociopoetics is really a blending of poetics with sociology. And if you had to study sociology as I did, you found that you go out, you collect all these rich, wonderful stories from people, and then you compress them into a dry, two-dimensional document and share that to a small, nodding audience of other sociologists. And when I had engaged my first research project, which was with teenaged mothers, that kind of enterprise just really didn't represent how I wanted to bring their stories to bear. I was really looking for another way. And so because I had also done some theater and because I had also done some poetry, I thought, well, how can I bring their words in a poetics, right, to audiences, and actually staged a reading of some of their actual words from their interviews, and just really began teasing out different forms to use to bring sociological insights to people, but using poetics. So it's really using the form of poetics to bring sociological insight. And also find that in teaching for students, it's such a beautiful way for them to bring their narratives to bear in the classroom and even in their presentations.
Is there a manual for sociopoetics?
God, no. Hopefully there never will be.
Why
This
not?
is the anti-manual, because that would be, we don't want to replicate those disciplinary Foucaultian ways of people compressing their brains. We want to open people up and really bring creative expression into sociology.
Did you coin the term?
I don't think so. I don't know.
And you say narratives. How important is narrative in poetry? Do you have a preference for a poem that tells a story?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. I have to say, I'm not like totally into just the symbolism of a tree or something, unless the tree dies and it's tragedy.
Right, right. And your students, how did they respond to this process of sociopoetics? Are they telling stories that sort of help them in their lives to find their way in the world, to understand the world? What are their goals for time in your courses?
Such a good question. I think bringing student stories is absolutely critical for the kind of subjects I teach and for the audiences that I have in my classroom. So people may come from completely different backgrounds. So say a class may be divided between students who are undocumented immigrants and students whose family members have been Border Patrol for, generations. Now, how do I help these students to be able to have conversation without a knockdown, drag out, right? And we do this by talking about having respect for people's experiences. So they begin with storytelling. And hopefully by the end of class, if they choose to, then they're able to produce a piece of work that carries that narrative, but also reflects some of the insights from class. And it is a way of bringing students into sociology who may have struggled with kind of, expository writing, and really find that creative writing is a great way for them to bring their rich experiences in for the public gaze in a way that can create understanding.
I was speaking to Gil Sotu. He runs a show called The Poetry for the Old Globe. He was asking me some questions, and one of the questions he asked me was, do you think that white people have an obligation to speak up, artists specifically, white artists, do they have an obligation to speak out against social injustice and to be very present right now at this time. What do you think about that?
I think that's such a great question. I think we all do. I think that, we bear witness, when we create, and we bear witness as we share those creations. And so we have to ask, what are we bearing witness to? And I know I always have to remind myself it's not just about bearing witness to oppression. It might be bearing witness to how great the pancakes were Saturday morning, right?
Indeed.
And it's all part of really reflecting on also the magic of being alive and being engaged in our lives with each other. But certainly, because there is so much oppression in our society, if our art can create a platform for people to create more understanding, which would then lead to social change, then I think we can aspire to nothing greater.
Your writing these days, has it been very political? Because I get a sense from a lot of the folks that I'm hearing and talking to that everything that's going on in the world, from the insurrection to the closures, but all of the politics that are happening through the last years, our last president, that a lot of the writing has been real heavy, very angry, very frustrated. Are you finding a balance and finding a way to write about those things, but also write about the pancakes on Sunday?
Totally, yes, because I need to. I have been so engaged with COVID and so engaged with addressing anti-Black racism because of my work with my faculty union, California Faculty Association. I'm the Associate Vice President for Racial and Social Justice. And so when George Floyd was killed, we were already in the midst of a campaign to center anti-racism and social justice in our work and to really address how is this impacting our students, how is this impacting our faculty. When this happened to George Floyd, we said, man, we have got to totally double down. We've got to go hard, and we've got to really create a set of demands that's going to transform our campuses. So we've been doing this as everyday work. And so, yes, I do sometimes need to back off and talk about the pancakes, because we have to also celebrate that we are alive while we have our lives, and that much is very pleasurable about that.
Yeah, Ted, we just spoke to Ted Washington, and I shared 2 of his haikus. He read a poem, and then I shared 2 of his haikus, and one was about the police as junkies to this kind of violence, and then the other was about weeds growing up through the cracks in the sidewalk. So I think a lot of writers are trying to find a balance between these deep feelings, what they really feel about what's going on in the world, and a need to get that out there, but also to feel well in general, to still find beauty. Yeah. Will you read us a poem?
I will, actually. And the one I want to share with you is actually kind of a retrospective on growing up. It's called Of Broke Glass and Green Grass. Born Negro Navy, hatched in Quonset huts, eyes stitched to a gray shape off the pier, tracked daddy to a distant line halfway to the sky. We lived in New England with no seatbelts. Chrissy and I held to a cord attached to our parents' seat, rode through snow in a Pontiac with no floorboards, clutching Sunday school dimes. We were always moving when Daddy got orders, coast to coast, black to white, city to burb. Navy Negro made me odd as Calypso and Daddy's quick-clipped words, British wool in the islands, and Mommy's typewriter with an Inya, and our Red Island primer phonetics. In the D.C. alley, the neighbor kids said, we talked funny, knocked us down, then made friends, taught us double Dutch, and jumping Red Rover onto broken bits of glass and cement instead of green grass. Suburbs silenced me until a curse split my mouth on the color line crossing the college classroom, pulled full-lip smiles out of my first Black professor, and didn't die. He was good-looking with a mustache and a Porsche. Cool kept changing, and I kept chasing, knew it wasn't sitting behind the Go Navy sign on our new used station wagon, even if we were flashing truckers' peace signs. There were no places to belong to. Even grown and remarried with my own big mouth kids, even when the island customs guy claimed me by face and family, and we weren't Navy Negro different from Black. We were island Beckway people gone to America who didn't come back. But then I thought they were weird, didn't cuss, but sucked their teeth in disgust. So I travel time, find home in moments from memories, eyes on a gray shape on a distant line halfway to the sky. Could be a dolphin. Keeping still like Texas relatives, moving my mouth like Calypso.
I was a Navy kid. We popped around all over the place. I was on Midway Island for a while. And I remember that Go Navy bumper sticker. We had that on the car too. My dad was a Seabee, so their mascot was this bumblebee that had like a wrench in one hand, a machine gun in the other, a mallet down here. Yeah, we were all over the place, you know.
Oh my
it was hard to make
God.
friends, you know.
Yes.
We popped somewhere here and there. You know, I think part of joining and being part of the community here, what it gave me when I first came to San Diego was like making a connection and knowing that I was staying, that this was home now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of your inspirations, Pat Parker is one of your inspirations, right? And
Yes.
Pat's got some extraordinary lines. Can I read a Pat Parker line, and then when you tell me a little bit about your inspirations? Pat Parker said, "Brother, you keep telling me how my enemy is the system, but I know that system you just hit me with is called a fist."
Yes.
Yeah.
I love how direct Pat Parker
Yeah.
is in her poetry. You never wonder about her symbolism. You never wonder what she means. She will hit you right over the head with it, just like the man in her poem hit her with his fist. You know, it's very direct. And I liked the kind of communication that encourages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, men do not kill their wives, they passion them to death, she wrote. Yeah, talking to Ron Salisbury, this actually came about partly because of our first poet laureate, the city of San Diego is helping with this, and kind of we're helping Ron out with this too. And he had mentioned the same, that when he's teaching, he wants his poets to get to that point, you know, get to that story, not have too many modifiers, not too much lettuce in the sandwich, if you will, you know what I mean? But about Ntasake Shange?
Oh, Ntasake Shange. You know, there are so many poets that have inspired me, but for Ntasake Shange, it was such an embodied experience because it was reading her words, saying her words, interacting with other people around her words. I was in her play for colored girls who considered suicide when the rainbow was enough. And I was living in this little white town in Eugene, Oregon, and here I had this opportunity to be in a play of black women, which put us in an intense, you know, engagement with each other for weeks, you know, actually months even, and then in the play. And so it was this immersion, and it just was a real catalyst for me, both in terms of the work that I was doing as a graduate student in sociology, is where I was really feeling like, this is just not me, this is just not me. And to be able to, you know, I have another poem where I say, Ntasake Shange's words poured me black into my mouth and just gave me permission, you know, to wallow in my culture.
Yeah. Did you go to Broadway? Did you?
No. Nothing so lofty. No,
Yeah.
I was in a small campus production and then, you know, a local production in Eugene, Oregon.
Is that right? Yeah. Tell me about music and musicality, because she had like Miles Davis in the house, and she had music around her all the time.
Yes.
And it very much became part of her rhythm and her poetry. Do you sort of live by a certain kind of music in your work?
In my work, I am so open to so many kinds of music. I mean, my husband is a musician, and we were dating actually when I was doing that play, and he would come with his guitar all the time. And in fact, the director had him open with a song for one of the productions that we did, and we actually had also a jazz group work with us in one of the productions of Ntasake Shange's play.
Your husband plays everything?
Flute, guitar, he sings. Yeah. Willie.
Shout out to Willie.
Willie, shout out to Willie. He's like, leave me out.
And I think too, you had mentioned before that when we were chatting that Langston Hughes, you're a fan of Langston Hughes, also an inspiration.
Absolutely, and I would just say, you know, I was introduced, so let me just say, so I grew up kind of literary, but it was very British. You know, and I mentioned my dad with the Calypso and West Indians. My dad's family is West Indian, and he was a UCLA British Lit major. And I mean Brit Lit. You know, my dad would sit at the table and quote from Beowulf. And we just thought it was hilarious to listen to him talk in Old English. You know, blip, the blip, the blip, you know, he would say all these funny words. But so I was introduced to, you know, Shakespeare and Poe and all of these people, and I loved the rhyming and the rhythm. That was very attractive to me. But when I went to UCSD and I took Black poetry with Shirley Williams, oh my God, a world opened, you know. And she gave us Langston Hughes, and she gave us Murray Baraka, who at that time was Leroy Jones, and she just introduced us to a wealth of Black poetry, which I loved all of it. But yes, Langston Hughes was my greatest love at the beginning. And I came later to into Sakishange with For Colored Girls, because I was like, okay, now there's my story, you know? Langston Hughes, that was our story, but you know, narrowing right down to, you know, who is going to talk about a Black girl? When is a Black girl going to matter in any story, in any narrative? That was huge.
You brought one of her poems, yeah?
I did.
Will you read it for us?
Did. This is a piece of because she has this whole choreo poem, and it's just so beautiful. You know, it's one of those things you're like, wish I wrote that. Somebody, anybody, sing a Black girl's song. Bring her out to know herself, to know you. But sing her rhythms, Karen, struggle, hard times. Sing her song of life. She's been dead so long, closed in silence so long. She doesn't know the sound of her own voice, her infinite beauty. She's half notes scattered, without rhythm, no tune. Sing her sighs, sing the song of her possibilities. Sing a righteous gospel. Let her be born and handled warmly. And this is for colored girls who considered suicide when the rainbow is enough.
Your voice, I've read with you, I've heard you read so many times, and I have to say, your voice, I just live for it. I love to go to reading and know that you're there, and I just wait for that moment when the room goes quiet because they hear your voice. Will you talk to me about your, did you start like all poets kind of reading very quickly or real choppy and chunky? Did you come into a pacing and a rhythm?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I have to say, it took me a while to like put it all together. And I, you know, it's like you have this epiphany, but my first moment of poetry was as a child. I had been wandering in my grandmother's garden and a poem came to me, which that sometimes happens, you know, a poem just, it arrives. You know, it arrives in your head with full sound and everything. And I went in the house and my uncle said, "What have you been doing?" I said, "I have been doing a poem." And he said, "Great, let's do the poem for the family." And so he assembled the whole family. This is my extended family. He extended all of the family to come together in the living room. They all sat on all the chairs and couches. He sat down at the piano and began, so you asked about music, he began playing. This was a guy who could listen to something once and play it. And he somehow played music to the poem that I said. I remember not a word of it. But I did come back to poetry. It's like it seems to find me in times of trouble. You know, so when I moved to Annapolis, Maryland, they were integrating the schools. I was getting inwarded every day, you know, in class. It was awful. Poetry came back to me. It was like, we are waiting patiently until we see the day when all mankind will join their hands and each can have a say, you know. But it wasn't until graduate school when I got back into poetry and I had done that play that I said, oh, I have been acting into Sakishange's words. What if I performed mine? So it wasn't until then that I thought about really thinking about what I was saying. What were the feelings that went with that? How can I convey that? And so it was, honestly, it was because I'd done the play that I put that together with my poetry. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that before?
What do you like to do the most? Do you like to get up on stage and perform? Do you enjoy the process, the writing part of it? Like, what gives you joy, more joy, I should say, to sit down and craft a poem, or to have that moment of inspiration, an epiphany, and then go sit because you've been sort of stricken by the muse? Or do you like to get up to the microphone?
It's really hard to sit down and write a poem. I mean, you know this. It's so hard. You sit down and you're like, damn, this sucks. This is really horrible. This is just ugly. Nothing's coming. But then when it arrives, like if you didn't even know you were pregnant, then boom, there's the baby. You're like, whoa, you're beautiful, right? So I really love every part of it. I do love revise. I do love that. And I don't get impatient with that. And I was painting with a friend one time, so I was like, you do watercolor, that looks so fun. Let's do that. It was so boring. I thought I was gonna die. It's like, this is horrible, let's do poetry instead. And it was more so, doing poetry with others is fun. I like sharing. I mean, like if you just came to my house with a couple of other people and we just kept sharing all night long, that would be so fun. Add a little wine, even more fun.
Indeed.
I love that. I love the performance too. I love to perform poetry, but I think what I most love is I love our poetry community here. This is really a unique place, San Diego. Like you, Navy kid, I've lived so many places that haven't really embraced me. That San Diego, the poetry community, I just have felt at home, like right away. And I love that you could, anybody can come from any place of life and take the stage and have everybody's ear. And I love that. I love the gathering. I love the sharing. I love hearing somebody's first really horrible love poem.
Me too.
Because it just makes me so happy that they dared and they tried and they shared, you know? It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I was talking to Anthony. We went to lunch a little bit ago, Anthony Blackshear, and he was, we were talking about those poets who come green, brand new, they get up to the microphone and they're like, this is my first time, and everybody goes, yeah. And so they get that community support. But then there's always people in the room who are like, they tune out, but we kind of tune in because there's always a gem in there somewhere. There's a line, there's a metaphor, and then there's something in there that's really coming from inside, no matter how green the poem is, or the structure of the poem, or the way the poet reads it. So we had sort of the same feeling about readings in general.
Yeah.
Did you do slam for a little while? You did a little bit of poetry slam, right?
I did. I was in the first citywide slam, which I won.
Oh,
frankly.
check you out.
I did.
What was the grand prize? Was it like 10,000 and a
no.
and a trip to Cabo?
I don't think there was money. If there was money, it was probably an inconsequential amount because I honestly don't remember any money. But I remember, to me, like the prize was like competing at the San Diego, what was it used to be called? Street scenes.
Yeah.
Competing at street scenes and looking out as I was doing my poem, and there was Quincy Troop sitting out there. It was like, oh, Quincy Troop's in the audience, It was so cool. And it was beautiful, just a beautiful time. Angela and Pat Payne were there. And so it was just a beautiful, beautiful time.
Pat Payne came down a long time ago. She was at the time she was at San Francisco State University or University of San Francisco, I can't remember. But she came down and she did our show and she was fantastic. We put her up over there at in Little Italy, so she got to stay in a nice place.
Oh, Pat's awesome.
Yeah, she's great, a really tremendous voice, yeah.
And then I remember we had a slam team, which I was on as an alternate, and then something happened that I actually got to be on it. I can't remember who fell out, but we went up to this beautiful meadow, and there's all this Henry Miller stuff. You were there. The
Miller Library.
And that was just such a beautiful setting. And it was just all this poetry all day.
Yeah, right there in the woods, in the meadow, and it's up by Michelle Pfeiffer State Park, right?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, just a gorgeous place, and like a cliffside that drops hundreds of feet. And
I love that.
Waterfalls and the whole thing. Yeah, and all the poets, all the cities or at least it was all California.
Yeah,
right?
it was
Wasn't
a
all this-
regional slam. So that was awesome.
Yeah, that's a neat show. Plus then you go into the Henry Miller Library and it's total inspiration.
Yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah, and then the tourists are coming through. It's such an interesting mix of people, and then the sculptures in the garden are really
I know,
weird.
it was
you
just
remember the
very
sculptures?
trippy.
Yeah, and there's like a boat in there too. Was there a boat at the time?
And some of the
Like half a
sculptures
ship
were
in there.
like also seats that you could sit on.
Yeah.
You'd be like, should I really? You know?
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed that reading too. Well, I want to thank you, Sharon. I love you. I'm going to say it. And I'm so glad that you're here in San Diego as an inspiration to other poets. I'm very much honored that you came to have a conversation with me for Conversations with Poets. And I want to thank the camera guys, everybody. Anthony Blackshirt, thank you. Willie for getting down here and all the support and love over the years so that this could be possible. So thanks, and we'll see you at the next Conversations with Poets.